Hello.
Hola.
Bonjour.
Привет. 你好.
Hello and welcome to Language with You. I would like to talk about gender-neutral pronouns, trying to stay as apolitical as possible because I don't want to be banned from YouTube, but I think you'll know what my views are more or less if I stay neutral, no pun intended. I want to talk about it from a linguistic perspective if possible. Today there's talk about using gender-neutral pronouns all the time. For some people it should be imposed. Others just believe that it's going to become the common thing to do. But does it work, linguistically speaking? Well, first of all, there's a bit of a confusion as to what a gender-neutral pronoun is, but I'll be focusing more on they and them and themselves, because that's the one that is said to be the most easy to adopt, as opposed to others like ze, etc., that are not really sticking into people's minds. But let's look at it first at what a pronoun is. Everybody knows that the personal pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, etc., etc. Then there's object pronouns, me, you love me, I love you, etc. Then there's possessive pronouns, mine, yours, his, hers, its, etc., etc. And then there's the reflexive ones, which is myself, yourself, etc. Well, the ones highlighted in red are the ones that concern the people who say we should use gender-neutral pronouns, because at the end of the day, it's just about how to refer to them. If you're talking to a person, whoever it is, you say you. So it only concerns the third person, his or her, etc., which is supposed to be a microaggression if you don't use the neutral, because you're assigning a gender to this person. As I said, I'm going to try and stay very neutral, but yeah. Okay, and I'm leaving out of the discussion more innovative pronouns such as them, demon, and demon self that I heard the other day, where you're supposed to say, yeah, I love demon, and I hope dem or them, I don't know how to pronounce it, loves demon self too. I'm not going there. Anyway, there's also something else that is equated to personal pronouns, but it's not a pronoun. And you may recall from English classes, or if you learned English as a second language like I did, my, your, his, her, which get kind of ignored in this whole new rule, are possessive adjectives because they cannot replace a noun, they modify it. Anyway, I leave the jargon for another day. Basically, those are the key words that are problematic nowadays. Well, this is just for English, and English actually is a very non-gendered language, or gender neutral in a sense, because if you look at other languages, you'll see that in other systems, gender as understood here, male or female, is used a lot in other languages, and it would be very difficult to modify it. For example, in Russian, you change the ending. You can opt for using the pronoun in the very beginning here, ya, vous, on, etc. But you don't have to. Just the end tells you if it's a male here, pashol, or pashla. Okay, that's male, female. There is no neutral. There is a neutral gender too, but it doesn't have to do with male or female. In fact, the origin is often confused for female or male distinctions in objects. A watch in Spanish is feminine, while in German will be masculine, etc. And it's said to influence how we think about those objects, yes, but it doesn't have to be necessarily a distinction that was there from the beginning in terms of male and female. It's more complicated than that, historically speaking. Anyway, so Russian, for example, uses the endings like that. Polish is the same case as many languages. But Spanish, for example, has he and she, él, ella, but it also has feminine and masculine for we and you plural, and they plural. So see, there's more genders in Spanish. Then there's a few less gender pronouns in French, because you only have it in singular, he and she, and they, il, elle. But they're pronounced the same, the singular and the plural. Okay, even more changes. This one, don't quote me on it because I just took it from Quora. I don't know Japanese, but as you can see, there's many pronouns, and you can pause the video and read the explanation as to which one is what. Then in Mandarin, you could say, oh, maybe Mandarin is gender neutral because we have, they're all pronounced the same. The singular for he or she is ta, and you don't see the difference except in writing. The little guy, almost like a standing person on the left, that means it's male, and this little swirly thingy is the symbol for woman. So, but they're pronounced the same, ta, ta, and the plural tamen, tamen, same thing, just male he, plural she, plural. Okay, so see, every language has different uses of these gender pronouns. Then in Lee here, it's a language in Papua New Guinea. New Guinea, I never know how to pronounce that country's name, has many genders. So it has the singular, it's actually numbers, but they're equated to genders many times. So singular, dual, two things, trial, three things, paucal is a few things, and then plural. And it will change whether it's he or she. You will have to change them according to those numbers or ways to grouping numbers, which means you end up with a lot of pronouns. Then in Tongan, you have what is said inclusive pronouns and exclusive pronouns. So me and you without him, or we meaning me and you without the third person. That would be an exclusive one. And then me, you, and them, it would be an inclusive use of the pronoun. So again, they use pronouns differently. Then you have in Tabasaran, it's a language in Russia. It's one of the ones that are said to have the most cases. Grammatical cases are changes in a word that you make because of the function, the grammatical function of a word in a sentence. So if the object of the person you're describing is the subject in the sentence, it will be used with a certain form. If it's the object, another form. If it's the possessive, another form, etc. You have a bit of a clue about that, or a remnant perhaps of cases in English when you say I love him and not I love he. That would kind of be equivalent to cases. So in Tabasaran, you would have to change the pronoun 53 times depending on what function in the sentence that pronoun or that word is being used for. And then, take note of this, there are many languages that don't have gendered, and I've seen some articles saying that gender neutral languages or non-gendered languages promote gender equality and all that. I actually don't see any evidence of it. If you look at languages like Finnish, for example, where, gender equality is supposed to be very, very high in those countries. So all the italic ones have quite a bit of gender equality. The bold ones are definitely not on the list of very equal gender opportunity ones, and the underlined ones are languages spoken in countries where I don't think gender equality is very big, and in fact some of them overtly talk about not allowing, for example, gay same-sex marriage and LGBT activity in a country. So yeah, I don't think that having no genders in the language will equate to a more gender neutral society. Okay, so are they, them, themselves, their, etc. Neutral? I've seen both arguments. Some people say that they're great because they eliminate the famous word nowadays, microaggression. So an aggression where you don't even notice you're being aggressive towards somebody. You're just insulting the person very subtly. Well, for some non-binary people, it eliminates microaggression because you're not calling them he if they want to be a she, or vice versa. However, I've seen the other side of that argument, which is people who have worked very, very hard to look like a she or to look like a he, and then suddenly you start calling them they, and they're like, wait a minute, why did I work so hard to become a she or a he if you're just going to call me by something neutral? So within that community, there's a dispute on whether they, them, and themselves should be used or not. The second argument is that, well, it's not a big deal, it's already used, as in, I don't know, yes, last night I stayed at my neighbor's house because their parents weren't there, something like that. The person is trying to be ambiguous and therefore using the they so that they don't have to explain whether the person is a he or a she. Or somebody forgot their wallet. You don't know if the person who forgot the wallet is a he or a she, so therefore you use they. Well, it's true, they're already used, but for specific cases where when you actually don't know who the person is, in my opinion, it actually adds vagueness, because when you're actually in front of that person and you're talking about them, in theory, you know who they are, so you shouldn't have to use the they. And if it was me to whom the they was addressed at, I would actually feel that I'm more disrespected in a sense, because it's so vague that I'm like, okay, I don't even deserve a pronoun to be called by. I think some of these people don't realize that it's actually kind of diminishing to say they when I'm basically calling them a person who I'm not really sure what they are. That can't be good. Anyway, another argument is that they're very easy to learn, and as we've seen with examples from other languages, yeah, they can be easy to learn. You can learn anything if you put your mind to it. But the problem is that they're equating the ease with which you can learn them to the ease with which you can accept them. And that's very different. They won't change our psychology. They won't change the way we perceive that person. And I think that the they actually adds more weirdness to it, in the sense that if you're supposed to call somebody by they, you are supposed to call them almost a freak. Anyway, I don't want to get political here. Some people say they show respect because you're not using a pronoun that they don't like, so you're respecting their sensitivities. Yeah, but very often they ignore the fact that it's the content of the sentence that will show respect. What if I say they are a jerk? Am I respecting them if they didn't do anything to me? Or they are even worse stuff that I could say. They're not even focusing on that. All you have to do is they. So if I call you a very stupid person, but I say they are a very stupid person, then I'm being respectful. I think that's backwards, but whatever. Then on the pro camp, some people say they convey reality, because those the non-binary gang says that their reality is that they don't identify with either he or she. Therefore, you are reflecting reality. Yes, but you're reflecting their reality. And do you actually want to convey that reality when it's an approval of something not normal, an approval of something that in the past was considered a mental illness? Do you want to make that reality even more reinforced, rather than accepting the person for who they are, regardless of their sexual preferences, regardless of their psychological makeup? Do you actually want to make a distinction? In my view, that makes it even more out there that there is a minority and that they're not like the rest of the people. So I don't know why they would promote that in language. And then finally, they promote freedom, or so they say, because, it's freedom of speech. Yeah, but freedom of speech for whom? When one camp is trying to police language to make the rest of the people talk in their way. Freedom should come from both sides having equal rights, or from you being able to do whatever you want without violating other people's free will. And in this case, it's quite tenuous, and I think that if it becomes the norm, there will be a backlash, because you cannot impose. 1984 is a fiction, is a work of fiction. It doesn't happen like that in reality. For sure, you have words that change, and I'll talk about that in the future. This video is just about pronouns, and there are words that change, and that change people's view of things. For example, the Ministry of Defense used to be called the Ministry of War. Which one are you more likely to defend? Well, the Ministry of Defense, right? That does change something. But when you're talking about pronouns are a function word. They're vague. They replace something else. And when that pronoun is kind of vague, you got a problem, because you're adding vagueness to what's already supposed to be vague. Okay, and then finally, they are clear. Well, pronouns aren't clear by definition. Like pronouns, you can replace anything with a pronoun. And it's true that sometimes you need to ask clarifications, even with he, with you, with whatever. Like, he gave me this book. He, who? We ask for clarification all the time. So they is not more clear than others. In fact, it's more vague. It adds ambiguity about who you're talking to. Are you talking about one person or two people, etc.? And they just make the conversation harder to follow unless both people are very aware of the context. So yeah, I think the issue here is that there is no benefit from using they. Yes, it has been used since the 17th century or something, I think, and that's okay. But for a specific case where you really don't know who the person you're talking about is, not once you've seen them and they're in your presence. That's very different. When you've seen them, they're in your presence, or you know who they are, you know them by name, you already have a reference. And whether you like it or not, we divide our reality based on very often on biological sex. Does the person have a penis or does the person have a vagina? Those are the definitions of male and female. And it's very difficult to distort that, to change that in people's minds for a reason. Okay, from a more linguistic perspective, I don't think language is arbitrary as it's usually taught, meaning that probably words have a meaning beyond what we understand, and I've talked about that in my sounds and meaning videos. I don't think that you can impose language as it is said. You can only a few words, but all the structure, it's in our psyche, it's in our way of viewing the world, it's in who we are, etc. It's not so easy to say let's change something and everybody will start using it. It's only when there's a real need that appears. Say, for example, when scanners came about, the word scanner was created because there was a new object, a new reality that needed to be described. In the case of genders, we have the genders that we need. So I don't think it's a really productive change. Then there's a fact that I mentioned before, that English, actually, the country in which this non-binary movement and LGBT movement and stuff is the most present, is ironically one of the countries who uses one of the most gender neutral languages, meaning that, if you had to change Spanish or German, and there are ideological movements that are trying to do that, it becomes way more complicated, because you can't just say the young person. All of those have a gender in Spanish, in French, in German, etc. So you would have to change the whole sentence. You can't just change a pronoun like you can in English. So ironically, the people who fight the most for their gender neutral language are in a country where grammatical genders are a very, very small portion of their language. And I think that says something about society rather than about language. Third, one that drives me mad is that the whole definition of gender as you see it today is completely new. It doesn't apply to reality, and especially not to linguistic reality. In linguistics, a gender is just a class of nouns. And depending on what language you speak, you have different classes. So you will have a class for round or for flat objects. You will have a class for animate or inanimate. You will have a class for person or non-person. Depending on the language, there's languages with like 50 or so classifiers, markers of a gender. Male and female is just one of them. Okay, so very often it gets confused, and grammatical gender is just a class of nouns. It has nothing to do with your prejudices about somebody, with your view of somebody, etc. That's all modern leftist ideology. Okay, and then, as I said, it would imply changing entire languages that are gendered. I already explained in the case of Spanish or German, you would have to change every single word in a sentence in many cases in order to make it gender neutral. While if you ask anybody, they're not biased against gender. It's just the way your language is. I bought a new car. The new is masculine in Spanish, but it doesn't mean that I'm seeing the car as a masculine thing and I'm defending the patriarchy and all that nonsense. It's just the way it is. It just finishes with an O, which makes it masculine. That's it. No more agendas behind it. If you see any agenda behind it, you're trying to see enemies or problems when there are none. The same with the collective male, which is very present in languages like French or Spanish, where if you have, say, a group of men, you say they masculine. If you have a group of women, you say they feminine. And if you have both of them together, you say they masculine. It doesn't make men more powerful or any nonsense like that. It's just the way language is. So don't be paranoid about it, okay? And then languages, I think, change very, very slowly according to reality's needs. Like I said, it's got nothing to do with imposing it. If you impose it, very often it backfires unless you have a specific need and a specific obvious thing that everybody agrees on, like as in the case of the scanner. Otherwise, don't bother with it because you won't be able to impose it. You won't be able to change people's minds behind it. And language is related to mind. And we describe what we see, we describe what we feel, we talk about what we are, etc. You cannot change that very easily when you're just a minority imposing a new view of reality onto the rest of the people. It just doesn't work like that in a linguistic community. I haven't seen any examples, and I don't think we'll see them anytime soon. And finally, a point that many people don't know about is that when you use pronouns, you're actually showing where you focus your attention on. And let's look at it in more detail. There's a book, a great little book called The Secret Life of Pronouns by Penbaker. And I recommend that you read it because it's fun, it's easy to read, and it actually says a lot about people's pronouns. And the people promoting the gender-neutral pronouns don't pay attention to these things. But anyway, the idea is that the function words, prepositions, conjunctions, all the little words that we use in everyday language make up for 10% of the vocabulary, so it's not a lot, but they're 60% of the words we use. So we use them the most, just that they're, in a whole sentence, you use a few pronouns or articles, prepositions, etc. And most of the time we focus on the content, right? So I could say, for example, Mary loves book, and you would understand the meaning of the sentence. But normally I say Mary loves the book, and that function word doesn't add anything to the meaning, or so it is believed, but it adds to the grammaticality of the sentence. Well, there's actually the fact that if you use pronouns specifically, you actually have to know a lot of context, and you have to have a lot of knowledge about society. They're social words. You need social knowledge because you need to know who the person is talking about when they talk about he or she or they, etc. So they're social words, okay? Now, Penbaker did several studies, and by taking a bunch of texts and running them through a computer, he was able to determine the amount of function words that the person used, and he discovered that women in general use more of the first person, so I, me, myself, etc. Women also use more cognitive words, so I think, I believe, all those expressions, right? So it shows that they're not so sure of what they're saying in general. And they also use more social words, so friends, family, etc. All those combined tells you this text is more likely to have been written by a woman. Then on the opposite end, men use more articles because they're, it's almost like they're wired to talk about concrete things more often. The car broke down, etc. And it's not about stereotypes here. It's about what do we each use most commonly based on our psychological makeup. Well, in the case of non-binary people, it would have to be studied to see if they actually, the ones that are really identifying with a woman can use more of a womanly language, and the ones that are identified with men don't. I don't think that's been done, but that would certainly be interesting to see how much it actually changes your internal makeup. The other thing about the pronouns I and me is that they show the person, as opposed to what is commonly believed, which is like the person will be more egocentric if they use a lot of I and me, etc. It shows that there's either a depression. Many people, when they go through a trauma, will use I and me first, and then as they process the trauma, they will change to more articles, for example, or they use the third person a lot more. They show introspection, they show vulnerability, etc. The I and me is almost like a more fragile ego, if you wish. And then we is, on the contrary, shows more of a high status. So leaders will use we a lot, our, rather than I. And he compared politicians, for example, and the ones that were successful indeed use more we, for example. Okay, and then in passing, he brings up the case of a woman who was transitioning to be a man and another man who was taking testosterone to increase his muscle mass. And they were keeping journals or something, and he noticed they allowed Penn Baker to read the journal entries, and so he ran them by through his computer program, and he saw that when the person took a testosterone injection within 24 hours, their social pronouns would go down, so they would be more manly in their speech. And as soon as the testosterone levels went down, the social pronouns would increase. So there is something hormonal, almost chemical, about which pronouns we use. And you see, this is not enforced. This is just the effect of a hormone. And it may fluctuate in non-binary people too. I'm not around many of them, so I can't tell you for sure, but I think that if you were to study them, you would see that difference. It's not a matter of imposing a pronoun use. It's just what it is based on biology and based on chemistry. And then the funny thing is that on the whole book, you won't find any difference in terms of you or they. Those are just neutral. Everybody can use them. The difference is in between I and me and we, etc., and how women or men talk in general. So, yeah, and I'll leave you with this one of these articles that I found. This is from March 2023, where they did a blind test, supposedly on companies that were that were promoting gender equality, etc., and inclusivity. And so they did a tricky thing. They put like 180 resumes out for somebody to evaluate, and they use gender ambiguous names like Taylor. It could be a woman or a man. And then they had to add their preferred pronouns on their resume, and they used they them. They didn't do the same with he and she. Why? Well, I think it's because most of the time it's obvious, and you shouldn't have to spell it out. But anyway, that was the test, and lo and behold, most of these companies, so were equal opportunity employers, blah blah blah, they were boasting about how righteous they are when it comes to equality. And the problem is that those resumes that were gender neutral, they received 8% less interest, probably more actually. And the article ends up with this: it's incredibly disappointing and unethical that many of the hiring managers of our study would disqualify a candidate for being authentic. Well, how do I say this without being political here? There's nothing unethical. It's just normal human beings acting from their normal psyche. And there's nothing about being authentic in the sense when you use a they, a them, etc. That is part of the programming that minority is being subjected to, and we should have sympathy for that, but we shouldn't take it as the truth. And I feel very sympathetic towards some people who are influenced by these ideologies. I don't feel sympathetic towards the ones that try to impose these ridiculous language measures, because, yeah, they just won't fly. They don't work because people don't work that way. Anyway, I hope you like this video, and there'll be more about gender neutral stuff and other things if this one doesn't get deleted. But see you next time for more about language on my channel, and please subscribe or leave me a comment if you like the content. Bye!